quantum boast of what it has withstood. Binds our hearts from coast to coast, the pride of nationhood. We loyal sons and daughters of to hereby make it known. These fields and hills beyond recall are now our very own. We write our names on history's page with expectations great. Straight guardians of our heritage, firm craftsmen of our faith.
Kindly be seated. Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, members of Parliament of Barbados, President of the Senate, Senator Reginald Farley, and members of the Senate of Barbados, His Excellency David Commission, His Excellency Sergio Pastrana, His Excellency Alvaro Cordero, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very pleasant good evening. Welcome to Jubilee Gardens. Welcome to the annual commemoration ceremony here at Jubilee Gardens as we recognize the day of national significance. Truly a day when history is written, when history is told, and when all are certainly educated as to the importance of this day. I'm Antoine Williams. I take great pleasure now in welcoming the Member of Parliament for the City of Bridgetown, the Honorable Jeffrey Bostick, to offer the welcome remarks.
Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Motley, the other members of Parliament, President of the Senate, and any other senators who are here, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Ambassador Commission and members of the Climate Pain Movement, ambassadors from the People's Republic of Cuba, Ambassador Cordero, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I know that we are here in Jubilee Gardens, but I also know that for me, this place is also the Lower Green. The Lower Green, for those of you who are old enough to remember. And I'm indeed delighted as the MP for the City of Bridgetown to be here this afternoon to participate and give a few words of welcome during this ceremony that recognizes the Day of National Significance. And we are here recognizing the Day of National Significance in a city of international significance. And for me, this is a very important thing. I know that throughout history that there have been political, historical, and cultural icons, cultural activities and events that fortifies nations as time rolls by. And for me, today is no exception. Because although this is indeed a day of national significance, at this point in time, in my opinion, and based on my portfolio as Minister of Health and Wellness, it is also a day of national significance with additional significance. Because the times that were experienced in the 1930s, those times and those incidents that led to the riots of 1937 and the social, economic, and political revolution that would have taken place subsequent to those events. We in this country at this point in time, we have begun to experience the impact of a pandemic, of a virus that, to all intents and purposes, is crippling our economy in a similar way. It's creating economic hardships for our people, unemployment, a situation where our people have to experience solitude and isolation and separation, and all of the psychosocial impacts of the pandemic, quite similar to the psychosocial impacts of the period of the time leading up to the 1937 riots. And during those times, I remember the song, "Today is a funny night." Some of them say they're going to fight. But this time, all of us have to fight. All of us have to fight if we are to defeat this pandemic. And so, for me, I draw on the strength of that period of time and on the efforts of those persons who did what they had to do in order to achieve what they achieved. And this is the additional significance for me. And so I hope that on this day of national significance, that all Barbadians would recognize that, as those great men did back in those days, that we too can make a difference in our society and in our times to counter the social and economic issues that confront us in this time, especially those that result from the pandemic. And so, in conclusion, I would like to thank, and I could not leave the podium without thanking you, Ambassador Commission, and the members of the Clement Payne movement, for really keeping this alive and for doing everything that you continue to do on behalf of the country to raise our level of consciousness and to give us the hope that we can do just as well as our forefathers have done in order to take this country forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
In plenty and in times of need, the National Cultural Foundation commits to its mandate to develop and promote the culture and heritage of Barbados. We are a gatekeeper of Barbadian culture and the local creative economy. We are a sanctuary for artists of all art forms and their precious works. We are a sounding board and mentor for the cultural visionary. We are the National Cultural Foundation, and together with all Barbadians, we will continue to navigate, innovate, and create in whatever version of the future becomes the new reality.
Of independence on November 30th, 1966.
It is nice to be here one more time. We are usually in Golden Square, but miracles continue to happen, and next year we'll be enjoying that space over there. We give thanks. We, as African people, we weren't always enslaved. We were free people. And we built the world's greatest civilization along the banks of the River Nile, 4,100 miles. The first world female leader came out to Africa We have another female leader in Barbados, but that one came out of Africa. Hatchison, Ibashe. Imhotep, seen then in the ancient world as the god of medicine. Ibashe. Ibashe. Ramses II. Ibashe. Ramses VI. Ibashe. Imhotep, that great builder, that multi-genius, who I believe today the doctors of the world swear to this man when they're taking the Hippocratic oath. His name is Esculapius, as the Greek changed his name. Ibashe. And as we offer the world all the knowledge and wisdom coming out of the continent of Africa, you see what happened. We had to go through the maafa, the suffering, the shame, the degradation. And there are those who fought on our behalf for our liberation. I want to remind that this is a very short period in the history of African people. Look on the African continent, you see Sekou Touré, Ibashe. You see Kwame Nkrumah. You see Selassie the First. Yeah, thank you. And all those leaders too numerous to mention. We look to the Caribbean and we see our brothers and sisters not only in the Caribbean but in Latin America. You see our great leader Fidel Castro. You see Hugo Chavez. Even in Barbados you can look to Errol Walton Barrow. We can look to Owen Seymour Arthur and all the others to follow, who would have helped us to shape this Caribbean nation state as a one state. Today we come and we commemorate this day of national significance. Some people say riots in the land. Some people say a very organized plan, organized structure to take our people forward. Remember, these people who led this rebellion had us in mind. We can even go back to the Bailey's plantation with Busa. Busa never believed really that he would win against the mighty forces that came up against him. But he knew that good would come out of that and that we would be here today honoring in a wonderful way. And we give thanks to all the ancestors who would have paved the way for us, on whose shoulders we proudly stand today. And as we continue this journey, I see our esteemed elder, and we must remember all our elders who continue to make a contribution. Our esteemed elder Bobby Clark in our midst. I know he's up in age. He's here with us, and he intends to die with his boots on. Our Bobby Clark. We want to give thanks to all those living among us, the elders who will continue this tradition. I see our brother, Jerry Prescott, who continues against the odds to make this contribution. I see David Comershaw, the ambassador amongst us. And that this is his day. He intends this to be his day. And all the others. We want to remember all the organizations today that would have made a meaningful impact on this landscape of Barbados. We must remember the Israel Lover Foundation. We must remember the Clement Payne Center. It's been around for years. We must remember our Rastafari brethren and sisterin. We must remember the Nation of Islam and all those other organizations, the Spiritual Baptist Movement, and those who would like to take us to another level, to another level. We have to take this thing to another level. And we gathered here. Have we done enough? Once we are off the scene, will someone pour libation to us? Are we worthy? Or is there much more work for us to do? I want to bring the blessings on this country, Barbados. We've been going through a lot. We've been going through a lot as a people. We've been suffering. And we ask Lord Dumare and all the Imole to look on this country so that we could continue to be blessed and so that we could be a leading light, not only in the Caribbean, but also in the world. We ask that you give direction to the political leadership. This is a Pan-African event, and I see we have a Pan-African Prime Minister in our midst. And so we ask the universal energies to give her the guidance in the direction that she needs. It is rough out there. It is not easy living in the global world that don't like you. And so there's some decisions that may have to be taken. We have to deal with all the World Bank and the whatever else. And we know that's not an easy job. So we ask for guidance. We pray for peace on this rock. And we give thanks. We give thanks. We give thanks. Wading gung gung wadio. 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 All right.
The blessing offered by the Israel Lover Foundation drummers and Baba John Howell. In 1937, Barbados was a country greatly divided by race, with the white elite holding economic and political power. The native black population was employed mainly in the agricultural sector and suffered from poverty. There was a lack of opportunity and employment in the area, which kept the common man down and was not advanced due to the dismal labor conditions and socio-economic malaise. Clement Payne, one of the few men who stood up for the working people of Barbados and advocated for the labor reform and the formation of trade unions, was able to inspire the common man to rise up and fend for themselves. This is perhaps the ideal segue now as I invite Ambassador David Commission, President of the Clement Payne Movement, to offer his remarks, and certainly to inform you of the book written by him, The Clement Payne Story, compiled and edited by Ambassador Commission. And during the presentation, I will be reading excerpts from the same book.
Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Ministers of Government, Ambassador Pastrana, Honorable General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, can never forget the trade union at an event like this, Honorable Tony Moore, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades, all, good evening. Permit me to join with Honorable Jeffrey Bostick in welcoming all of you to the Lower Green. Don't know why they choose to call it Jubilee Gardens. Just like Golden Square, this too is sacred ground. For it is here that the Right Excellent Clement Payne in 1937 held many of his mass meetings. There were 3 locations: Golden Square, Carrington Village, and the Lower Green. Right here, Clement Payne spoke right here, sacred ground. Brothers and sisters, this year's commemoration of our July 26th Day of National Significance is special. It is special because it is taking place within the context of our imminent transformation into a republic with our very own indigenous Barbadian head of state. Clap for that. Now, properly understood, July 26 is the central catalytic and connecting event in the history of Barbados, the event that links our past with our future. It connects backwards to the abolition of slavery, the July 26 People's Rebellion actually jump-started the stalled social revolution that had been put in motion by the 1816 Bussa Rebellion and the associated 1834 abolition of slavery. That social revolution had stalled. July 26, the events of that day and the succeeding days jump-started that social revolution once again. And at the same time, it was the catalytic event that heralded the future, that put in motion the process that led to political parties, trade unions, universal adult suffrage, the revolution in education, independence, and the soon-to-be Republic of Barbados. There's a link, there's a connection, there's a journey from July 26 to what is going to happen on the 30th of November, 2021. Now, brothers and sisters, there are many reasons why it is right and necessary that our country must relieve itself of a colonialism based situation in which we have a head of state that is not indigenous to Barbados and elevate one of our own sons and daughters to that exalted post. There are many reasons, but I'll just touch on two of these reasons. Firstly, colonialism is an unnatural state. It is an aberration that is to be avoided at all costs. There is absolutely nothing natural about one nation ruling another, or about one people ruling another people. There is also nothing natural about any nation having a head of state who is a native and a citizen of a different nation, of another nation. Just as the head of state of Germany is a German, the head of state of Japan is a Japanese, the head of state of India is an Indian, the head of state of Britain is a British person, so too the head of state of Barbados should and must be a Bajan. It's really as simple as that. Secondly, the second reason, after serving as a Barbados diplomat for some 3 years now, it has become absolutely clear to me that our country, Barbados, is expected and is being called upon to play an extremely important leadership role in international affairs, particularly in relation to defending and advancing the interests of the nations and people of the developing world, the vast majority of humankind. In fact, both of the Caribbean countries that are represented here this evening, the two Caribbean countries that share the 26th of July as their Revolutionary Day, Barbados and Cuba, both of these countries are expected and are being called upon more and more to play important international leadership roles. Let us recall in passing that it was on the 26th of July, 1953, that the late, great Fidel Castro started the Cuban Revolution with an armed assault on Batista's military fortress known as the Moncada Barracks. But let me get back to this issue of why Barbados must have its own indigenous head of state. It is utterly incongruous for Barbados to be stepping forward on the world stage as a leader of a community of nations that were all former colonies, while at the same time Barbados holds on to the monarch of its former colonial master as its head of state. It doesn't look right. It doesn't make sense. Thank God this contradictory and inhibitory state of affairs will soon be corrected. Let us ensure, my Barbadian brothers and sisters, let us ensure that whenever the nations and peoples of this world look at Barbados, they see nothing other than a sovereign, resilient, independent, self-respecting, and self-reliant nation. You know, in conclusion, it was the Right Excellent Clement Payne himself who, in a speech delivered at Golden Square on the 21st of July, 1937, described Barbadians as sleeping giants. Well, thanks to the efforts of heroes like Israel Lovell, Ulrich Grant, Darnley Alleyne, Fitzgerald Menzies Chase, Mortimer Skeet, Eunice Nicey Belgrave, and Clement Payne himself, we are certainly wide awake and on the move. Let us ensure that we always remember and honor those names. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
My Political Memoirs of Barbados by Clement Payne, Chapter 1. At the age of 16, 6 months after I had completed my elementary training in Barbados, I became very interested in the politics of that country. I held many prominent positions as a junior clerk in some of the recognized offices there, during which I spent most of my spare time in reading and observing as much as possible. As a means of improving my knowledge of West Indian affairs, I thought I would do some traveling, and I elected to migrate to Trinidad, which I believed to be a larger and therefore more appropriate field for my ambition. On my arrival to that country, I found myself a stranger amongst strange people and in equally strange places. My stay was very short. I could not have really understood the people nor appreciate their doings. Ladies and gentlemen, we now offer you a presentation by Alistair Alexander featuring the richest out teen talent contestants.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we are, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Boy-ya-ya, 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 boy-ya-ya.
It is 1937, 121 years since the Great Bussa Rebellion, and 103 since slavery has been abolished. In this economy where wages are since 1838, the dog at Wakefield Plantation is fed better than me. I've sat here by the dock where the tide never rolls in. I've lived on faith and morning prayers. When I've asked for my daily bread, be conscious of making the highest appeal the Spirit can for social and economic justice. And Lord, Most High, who have read as refuge for the oppressed, have been long at this altar. But he always finally come for my hallelujah. All you who have taken the knee, take them up, touch hope. For out of the waters of this troubled harbor, answered prayer in a parted haircut, now steps on the shore. And his will now ever be the leading footprints on this nation's aspirational walk. Push up a bus, flash the superhero's name across a grateful chest. But Anthony who? Wait, before you sound the note, he must come. And this is the stage in its history that it gives great pleasure to introduce to the world, or pain that was in the oppressor's face, that sharp and intense pain, who grew up here and had only returned the 12 weeks earlier. Anthony, were he sneaking in like God's subversive light through the cracks of our marginalized and broken society, had been rousing the sleeping giant that began to turn in the awakening masses. Clement shook the nation and gave the wake-up call that we must not continue in this repressive nightmare, but for joy is coming in the morning, must educate and agitate, but not violate. The Golden Square and Lower Green meetings of that consciousness stirring pain drew crowds, followers in the hundreds. Among them, even as pain was, were 5 of the flaming swords of our Black Star Line commander, of our great UNI general, of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who, nostalgic for the kingdoms from which we had fallen, called out to Africa's great bow-down masses, "Up, you mighty people!" It is this general, his colossal foot soldiers, them of the Barbadian Pan-African chapter, that are liberty's lieutenants in my book, with the red, black, and green floating over. These leaders of the 37 rebellion advance in the same fight as the people's intellectual warriors O'Neill and Prescott, along with a special woman who had the spirit of Siran Gill. Anthony, they are that still unseen blast of wind that changed things, that must not remain so invisible. Lift a sound for the unsung. Climb note upon note and hang now their names in the highest place on earth, your head. For our heroes are not who the heads of government recognize, it is who we, the people. Read and break the silence of this grave ingratitude. And we, the people, we stand with a torrent thanks and recognize now the more significant Menzies Chase, Ulrich Grant, Mortimer Ski, Darley Allen, Israel Lovell, and let the people's full recognition be given to Eunice C. Belgrave, the vendor who dashing through her city collected pennies enough for the legal defense of our persecuted pain. See, his firebrand meetings had been such a whale of a wave in the mighty swell that was coming, that the trembling authorities in the haste to start what they could not stop, misstep, and foolishly decided them packing the trade union organizer, all right, excellent Clement Payne, on a boat out the island, and they tide washing. Bridgetown City was swept with rage, was on fire, riots in the land. And the people and them pulled down this racist oligarchy. And now, white tyranny now at my feet, cast down this Satan as to the bottom of this careenage.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we are, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Boy, yeah, boy, yeah.
And now on the eve of a new dawn, a sadness breaks in my eyes. In these riots, high waters are falling. It is that 20-something precious souls that said, give me liberty, are given death at the hands of the state. And Anthony, why did the blood of my own family, Adriana Rock, run in these streets as if black lives do not matter? And how many times must we, the black image of God, that is of no less divine value, be visited by this trailing blood, this Holocaust, this ever-expanding Red Sea? And even now, as I push through these tears, when will they part for black people? Sing the heroics of this unsung race. For liberty has no greater champion, no greater race than my race, than this bleeding race. So let our oppressors hide their lies with bronze, erect their mock heroes. But ours is the genuine, the real, the content of whose cause and character is more upright, more valiant than Britain's knighted murderers and looters, than Sir Henry Morgan, Sir Francis Drake, Nelson, and that criminal lot. Like a David come and fling this truth like a rock stone and mark this national victory of good over evil. Let every July put on the somber look of the great significance of its 26th day. 4 days did the tide sweep across our country. With it came the all-important Moyen Commission from England, delivering far-reaching social reforms, allowing trade unions to be legally formed. It's the beginning of our climb. Right Excellence Sir Hugh Springer, Right Excellence Sir Frank Walcott, national heroes, all our mighty stalwarts in the nation-shaking movement of labor. With the organization of labor came our first revolution that put us grantly in the hands of the working man. And now what is more than a Sir Grantley? Out of the Barbados Workers' Union, God gave that Udark Moses to lead Barbados laboring people into the locked doors of Government House and up Parliament's gated mountain that I thought I, a black man, could never climb. And I have got news for you. Who would silence my memory? In this very city, justice shall poetically give birth to a voice. Masters of ceremonies shall introduce him as mighty. The truth stands It is all the microphone we need. For those who had vision, the people's point of view told. Till like the bold expression of a prophecy, there would arise a folk warrior who would strap his guitar like a weapon, and with his strum smite the conscience of a nation. Let the Carter boy sing his haunting song. Anthony call up the ghost, the duppy of our difficult past. Come you, the youthful voice of the elders, roll back the curtains of freedom's struggle, and at the entrance of the line, I wasn't born, but me grandma tell me. Anthony, let your gripping intro lead us to a soulful reception of our heroes. Come ride upon your folk rhythm. Bring your guitar into the long years of public silence. For who, when social injustice created troubled waters, so prodigiously laid down their lives as a bridge to bring us to a just society. Before the God, the foundation of whose throne is justice, let the failing flesh of all messengers be his instrument still. And even now, as my own lips struggle to be worthy, by the grace of God, as we continue this most righteous struggle in the shadow of the right excellent image of Errol Walton Barrow and Sir Garfield St. Auburn Sobers, mighty Gabby, Dr. Carter, sing for his son's son, now suited in honor, that died and never knew that they would be someday seated in this balcony of valedictorians. For all our great heroes, a little Barbados has, in this globe's auditorium of authentic history, sing. Honorable Anthony, come and teach us all to sing. For all are so great and some.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we are, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Boy, yeah, boy, yeah, boy, yeah.
Sing for the Unsung, performance by Alice Alexandra featuring the richest teen talent contestants. And now, as we continue our celebration of the Day of National Significance here at the Lower Green, I welcome Tony Moore, Member of Parliament, General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union.
What a captivating performance, that last one. We are going. Heaven knows when, but we will get there. I know we will. I'm almost tempted this evening, Honorable Prime Minister, members of Parliament, Honorable Ambassadors, Commission, and my friend, Ambassador Pastrana, and other distinguished guests. I'm almost tempted to allow us to take for granted a lot of what we've heard so far, and a lot of what I think we know. That the disturbances of 1937, the hearings before the Moyne Commission, the 1939 passing of the Trade Union Act, and it's coming into force in 1940. The establishment of a labor department, the registration of the Barbados Workers' Union in 1941. I'm tempted not to mention these things because I believe we all know. But it is well known that the upheavals of the 1930s and the riots that we commemorate today spurred much of the social, economic, and political changes that occurred in Barbados post-1937. The disparity, as we hear it, between the haves and the have-nots, as it related to spending power, was particularly glaring, and this clearly inequitable position led to poverty at the level of the wage bar. I'm tempted not to mention that food was a concern. Sudden and abnormal rises in prices of food that make it impossible for ordinary peasants to be able to eat. I'm almost tempted not to mention that the housing conditions, the level of disrepair, the absence of sanitary arrangements, the high rents and overcrowding were deemed to be four main evils. Health was a challenge, but guess what? We didn't have health care insurance. We didn't have national insurance. We didn't have social security in any form. And that was the situation that confronted us in the early days. Today, as we in the Barbados Workers Union reflect on the journey of the past 84 years since the riots, naturally we are pleased at the strides that labor has made on behalf of the laboring classes and the country as a whole. But rather than define the achievements of labor in the few minutes I have, from ensuring democracy and the right to vote and securing a place for ordinary masses in parliament and in the workplace, from the enactment of social and labor legislation, improve housing, improve education, and infrastructural development, including roads, the roads that we still complain about. I want to reflect now on how the concerns in all of the areas that I've mentioned that led to the riots, how those concerns, still now in 2021, render our industrial democracy as necessary now as it was in 1937 and 1941. Housing, food prices, concerns over education, need for enhanced labor legislation, and in many respects, greed, even by those who look like us, has forced the Barbados Workers Union to keep alive the old banner that eternal vigilance is necessary. The price of our freedom is eternal vigilance. So yes, we have before us an unfinished task, and a birthday is as good a time as any for all of us to reflect. And I not only speak of the 84 years that we are in terms of the commemoration of the riots. I choose to have us recognize that the Barbados Workers Union, a direct offshoot of the riots, is in its 80th year and will be celebrating 80 on the 4th of October this year. On this day, yeah, you could clap for that. Thanks, Cindy. On this day of commemoration and in an atmosphere that we are all not only reflecting, but an atmosphere that in a large sense infuses much hope. As we reflect, many of us may be tempted to say, I wish I was there. I wish I was there. If I was there, I would have. But guess what? We were not there, but we are here. And what are we doing is the question before us to continue the struggle. In 2021, workmen's compensation and hours of work still being undermined by an employer class that seemingly lacks regard for human dignity. Trade union recognition still being challenged. Employers believe that they can unilaterally alter the terms and conditions of workers. And Minister of Labor, there is one before you. The most recent one, an employer on the West Coast. I don't know if you call it 5 Diamond or 5 Star. That believes that they can interfere with people's terms and conditions, namely pay. and that there will be no repercussions. That is not a matter for conciliation. It's with the Labor Department for investigation. And I know you will manage that. We still have challenges concerning rights. The rights of workers to be vaccinated or not to be vaccinated. And we have these competing with the rights of people to enjoy a safe and healthy environment. On the latter issue, the Barbados Workers Union has always argued and will continue to argue that the rights of persons generally must not be sacrificed on the altar of social convenience of anyone. I want to repeat that. The rights of persons generally must not be sacrificed on the altar of social convenience of anyone, even if the moment is a COVID moment. The freedom we have fought for allows us to express our views, whether conventional or otherwise. So there's a very nuanced debate going regarding whether or not people have the right to openly resist vaccinations. The Barbados Workers Union, on this 84th year of commemoration, and in its 80th year, celebrating its formation, recommits to the mission that was left to us by Clement Payne. Educate, agitate, but do not violate. As such, the BWU at its upcoming conference on the 28th of August this year will be debating, among other issues, the issue of vaccinations. From a rights perspective, yes, but also by examining our responsibilities. For as we address rights, we are not going to shy away from the responsibility we owe to our households, to our neighbors, and to this country. For the very essence of solidarity provides for us to be weaned away from whatever we choose to accept for ourselves, and it extends to us an obligation to see what we can do to benefit each other. So what's the difference between now, 84 years after the riots, and nearly 80 years after the formation of the Barbados Workers Union, and the period 1937? It is simply that this time around we are not challenging a white oligarchy. Our decision makers, those who represent us, they look like us. They are us. We are at a defining moment where our country needs all of us. This country needs all of us. And the Barbados Workers Union will oppose force from wherever it comes from, and force in whatever form it takes. Indeed, we urge for commitment to goodwill for all and for our future. Today, it is my hope, therefore, as my voice is heard, that it will be able to prick the social and moral conscience of many, and it will be able to stir the hearts, perhaps, of those whom we may believe do not possess such conscience. Clement Payne, Busser, Grantley Adams, Hugh Springer, Frank Walcott, Charles Duncan O'Neill, and others. We can't go back in time to say we are sorry. But in our actions in the now, we can and we must recommit to the struggle. We are going to get there. I know we can, but it depends on all of us. Thank you.
The morning opened nicely with a splendid sunshine on the very spot which had been selected by the gathering. The people assembled at the appointed time, and I addressed them on matters relating to the march. I emphasized on the point of non-violence and gave strict orders to dispense with all weapons if any person was so armed. At 8 o'clock, I led a march with an appropriate number of 300 workers and citizens. And during our march, we sang hymns and popular anthems composed on the loyalty to the British Empire, and in about 30 minutes, we reach our destination. Ladies and gentlemen, let's enjoy now that classic piece, Redemption Song, performed by Terry Mexican Arthur, featuring Willie Kerr and Mighty Bit Bit.
Yes, they're up I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit. But my hands were made strong by the hands of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption songs, these songs of freedom, redemption songs. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop at the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Ooh, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption of freedom, redemption, redemption songs. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Terry Mexico, Willie Kerr at the Mighty Bit Bit. And for you who have just joined us, throughout our performances, I'll be reading some excerpts from the book, The Clement Payne Story, compiled and edited by David Commission. Chapter 5. I was met by the Deputy Inspector General of Police, who politely inquired where I was going. I told him that I was desirous of seeking an interview with His Excellency, and trying to get an explanation from him, he arrested me and put me into the hands of a constable, and I was taken to the guardhouse at the Governor's Gate. About 5 minutes after, 13 others were also arrested. We now invite you to hear remarks from the Honorable Trevor Prescott, Member of Parliament and President of the Israel Lovell Foundation.
Good evening. A special good evening to the Honorable Prime Minister. All other persons are made up of those who are most significant in the Barbadian society, all of you. I don't want to push any great man thesis this evening, but I want to speak about our struggle of resistance as a people. I want to globalize the debate and put the chapter of the 1920s and 30s in context within the framework of a global debate. We have had a struggle and still continue to struggle today because people felt that we were not human beings. People cloud our history and the weakness of being able to appreciate the contribution of the greatness of our African people. And when I say African people, I speak in general about all black people across the world, is because of the propaganda and the distortions, the misrepresentations of truth. One of the first things we have to correct is this thing that we call history across Barbados. Barbadian public, because of the colonial system, relegate the importance of Clement Payne in our history and the importance of Israel Lovell as well. Because all of these men are men from obscurity. And the history of Barbados, under the writings and the thoughts of the colonialists, saw these men as criminals in this society. It took a level of consciousness which evolved in the society for us to recognize the contribution of Clement Payne to the general development of Barbados itself. If you had asked anybody in Barbados prior to the 1960s about Clement Payne or Israel Lovell, or even today when we speak, we keep talking about a riot. A riot is something that is spontaneous. 1937 riots, 1937 riots. It tells me that there's still a problem. A riot constitutes a spontaneous reaction that leads to disorder without any intentions for any progressive program to be unrolled. for the general development of society. Stop talking about a riot. What people did in 1937 occurred because of their experiences as human beings. They knew what suffering was. They understood what social degradation was. I heard the leader of the Barbados Workers' Union speaking about conditions in the city of Bridgetown. People didn't react because they were wild. The people recognized that they were treated less than how we expect human beings should be treated. So I would like to hear, I don't like coming to these ceremonies and hear anybody talking 1937 rats. Because the colonial writers wrote that, they knew what they were writing. They wanted to continue to enslave you by talking about the 1937 rats all the time. So you're senseless people who disrupt society but had no plan. Yet you then go on to say the empirical support documented that we never knew anything about before. Police records, reports from the prison in relation to what the Mons Commission was receiving from the police force. Only this morning I saw Israel Lovell's statement from Dandere prison, which is a major contradiction to what the police were saying about him. The same thing for Clement Payne. Even when the court made the decision, the people said he must be deported. Who are the people that said he must be deported? And why I want to tell you that we have some damage to repair. Not just the reparation program and what the colonial masters have done to us, and what is the value of the destruction. We have some internal repairs also to undertake. And today, as we reflect, we must also examine ourselves. It is a celebration, but it is also a reflection of our history. I wouldn't come here today and make you believe that we have had ultimate success because some cosmetic exercise occurred in 1838 or 1834. Because the struggle is a continuum, and there are different footsteps on the journey. 1937 was a critical footstep that we made. We then made footsteps in 61. And we're about to make an ultimate footstep onto a Republican form of government. So the journey continues. The journey continues. But we must not at any time try to overshadow the importance of the contribution that many other persons made through history. When we come here, we reflect on Bussa 1816. And none of the black people anywhere in the Western world would have been able to achieve these things had not for the 1791 revolt in Haiti. You must be eternally grateful to the Haitian people. And that psychological damage that was done in history again, of people constantly trying to make you believe that Haitian people engage in voodoo, Haitian people are backward people. The Haitian people were very clear on their program in 1791. But you know, they still want to give credit to the French by saying that the independence came in 1823. And then the French charged the same Haitian people for the destruction of themselves. In other words, they value the slaves that were destroyed as their property, and then force the people to pay them through the agencies of the United States of America reparation. And a distortion of what reparation is supposed to be. There's a necessity. When we understand clearly, there's a necessity for us to teach real history, factual history, truth, in our schools from the primary level right up to the tertiary level, not stupidness about any Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh and Columbus discovered the New World. Are we moronic to believe that these things are true? Can we not appreciate the wisdom and the foresight of our own historians and academics in Barbados and in the Caribbean and out of Africa itself? You have people in this society that wants to relegate history as a subject as insignificant. History in itself is multidisciplinary. History is political history, economic history, sociology, which is social history. Multiple disciplines coming together and making an analysis, not only repeating historically the record of human development and contributions. Nobody can tell you that any benevolent individual out of Europe, Quakers or anybody, is responsible for our Savior when we have so much points of resistance led by militant persons who knew, as somebody said it here rightfully, Busser knew clearly that he could not beat the militia. He knew that they had internal forces and external forces, but he stood up for principle, the importance of freedom. It's the same thing with Clement Payne. It's the same thing with Israel Lovell. End up in a prison. All the things that we glorify now, history will recall that these men end up incarcerated, Lovell in prison, and then the mental hospital. And Clement Payne deported to Trinidad and Tobago. Arguments over whether he was born in Trinidad or Barbados. Deport the man. Well, I'm saying that I want to make a call. Don't allow anybody to ever tell us that history is not important. It is what you are teaching that is unimportant. What you are imposing on people as education and history, that is unimportant, because it's a total distortion of truth. I hope that this day, while I want to rejoice, I enjoy bit. I enjoy Alistair. I enjoy Baba John. I enjoy David. But I still want y'all, I enjoy Tony. But I also want y'all to continue to reflect. And when you leave here, if I have not ever said anything sensible to you before in your life, I hope that I'm saying something sensible to you today. This may mold the government. Set about on a journey. Sometimes I end up in conflict with my colleagues because I am very serious about the trajectory. So I am not going to support certain people getting certain things, certain government buildings, like taxpayers' buildings, to put certain organizations in. I am not supporting that, but the majority rules in the circumstances. But I will never support it. But the party, in my view, when it can see the significance of occasions like this and allow persons to attend like you and me, and to have the president of the Vendors Association speaking, and to have Baba John from the Orisha Faith speaking, you cannot see what is in the mirror. Do you understand when the Prime Minister said to us must know who we are. We must know who we are. And the party must be clear. I know it's not a political meeting, but a party must be clear because it's governing the country of what underpins the philosophy that takes it to a number of objectives that we set about to achieve. And that is why the consciousness now allows us to be free of that statue. When I walk up Bridgetown with my little granddaughter or any of my family, I don't have to look in the face of Nelson anymore. That is progress. And if you think that there's nothing wrong with the Governor General being a surrogate of the Queen, hold on. The Prime Minister has given a commitment to the country that by the end of November 2021, this country would be a republic. I know David said we need an indigenous leader or representative, ceremonial representative in Government House. But even that, sometimes people don't quite understand. Although is a Barbadian is there, she's a surrogate of the Queen of England. I would not tell you about my personal views on the Queen of England, or I would not tell you about all of my personal views about the Lasses family this evening or the Drax family, because all of that is another chapter in the development of this government that I am a member of. I want to thank all the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here as an invitee, but also to speak as the president of the Israel Lovell Foundation. Anything that Prescott said the government of Barbados is not responsible for, I am the president of the Israel Lovell Foundation, and I am proud of that. And I am happy here today to be able to celebrate the contribution of these great men, and even the contribution being made by the great artists here this evening. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Trevor Prescott, President of the Israel Lovell Foundation. Truly the words of Trevor. Thank you so much. The Clement Payne story. Immediately after the charge against me was withdrawn, to my greatest surprise, I was served with an order of expulsion from the island, which was signed by His Excellency the Governor. I was reluctant in taking the order on the grounds of having an appeal case pending, but on the advice of my lawyer, who was retained by the people to defend me, I took it. I had confidence in him because he is the people's lawyer and the most outstanding barrister politician in the island of Barbados. He is Mr. G.H. Adams. Ladies and gentlemen, the performance now by the Pinans Creative Workshop as they pay tribute to one of Barbados's trademarks, cultural trademarks, the landship.
That's what's that. Attention! Hands in the air. Hands on your hips. 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 Communication. Come on, sailors. Pull those anchors. Pull. 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 Double time. Pull anchor. Pull anchor. Pull anchor. Pull anchor. Attention. Make yourself right. Front and center. Positions. Sailors. Iceberg ahead. Sailors. Tear arm. Attention. Roll call. Ancient school. Head up, sailor. Tuck in your shirt. Tuck in your shirt, sailor. Pull in your belly. Tap your tongue, man, breathe. All right. Nurses. Nurses. Maids. Captain. Policeman. Junior officer. Sailors. Move out. Sailors. Forward. Forward, 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 back, back, back. And to the right, and to the left. Forward, 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 back, back, back. And to the right, and to the left. Attention, sailors. Wine go low, down, and up, and down, and up. Sailors, take it around. Put your back in it. Circle it, let your luck stay. Attention, double march. Sailors, rough seas ahead. Sailors, these seas are getting rougher. Sailors, the seas are at their worst. Sailors, head for home.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Finance Creative Workshop paying tribute to one of Barbados' cultural landmarks, the Barbados Landship. It is now my pleasure to invite Ambassador Sergio Pastrana of the Republic of Cuba to offer his remarks.
Good evening. Protocol being established, I would like to first thank the organizers for this invitation to share our commemoration with the people of Barbados. The Honorable Prime Minister, Mia Mohammedli, members of Parliament, ministers, Ambassador Commission, Tony. The date of the 26th of July, as it has been said here today, is a milestone for both Barbados and Cuba, and for both national identities. This date marks a day of national significance commemorating events that occurred in Barbados in 1937 and in Cuba in 1953. However, both events are historically linked. Both refer to revolutionary uprisings that took place as a reaction to continued oppression of the labor force of the plantation economy, which was born in Barbados in the 17th century and came to grow to its mightiest force in Cuba in the early 20th century. Enormous masses of workers were imported over centuries, either by force, deceit, or greed, to both countries to provide the workforce which meant the build-up of massive sugarcane, cotton, banana, and other stock plantations. From those workers came the forces that decided once and again to fight oppressors who represented those foreign interests that exploited these lands for their own profit. As early as 1804, Baron von Humboldt wrote The Political Study of the Island of Cuba, a scholarly work that studied the slavery-based sugar plantation economy to arrive to the conclusion that apart from the intrinsic horror of slavery, such economies were not sustainable and were doomed to disappear in the not-so-distant future. This treatise was prohibited in all Spanish America. Soon, in 1816, here in Barbados, this was to be proven true by the rebellion led by General Busa, suffocated with a massacre. But the emancipation from slavery since the 1830s merely changed the face of exploitation that continued with partly hired salary workers who were only used as needed as cane cutters and longshoremen within an industry that continues to thrive only to enrich families in faraway metropolitan countries. While 100 years later, the third decade of the 20th century started with an increased value of sugar due to the ravaged European economies as a result of the First World War and the hiking of the prices of sugar, which provided enrichment to the imperialist powers and local oligarchies, the 1929 crash at the New York Stock Exchange announced the arrival of a crisis that grew all over the world to produce misery and hunger, mostly to the classes that provided eventual labor force to plantation economies. Thus, all over the wider Caribbean basin, Central America, and the northern shores of South America, one after the other, there were labor revolts in every country from 1933 to the end of the decade, which heralded the birth of the labor movement in these lands. In Cuba, the institutionalization of the governmental structure did not guarantee the rights that were reflected in a new constitution effort because government continued to be dominated by the oligarchy until eventually, when elections would have finally won by the popular forces, Fulgencio Batista produced a coup d'etat that guaranteed to the imperialist powers and the mafia that Cuba will continue to be the playground and money laundering capital of the world. That is when a young law graduate by the name of Fidel Castro took the belt that had heralded in 1868 the emancipation of Cuban slaves, together with their masters in the fight for independence, and paraded it in a tour of the whole country. Those young lawyers who accompanied the Liberty Bell filed a demand before the law authorities to declare the illegal condition of that government. And once dismissed by the authorities, they decided that their only option left to save the country was to assault the military. In Cuba, that 26th of July 1953 witnessed how this cohort of youngsters in their 20s stormed the second mightiest military outpost of the country. Many of them lost their lives in that attack, but they provided the spark that fired up a revolution that in merely 6 years brought about at last the triumph of the oppressed over their former masters. That revolution leaps on to share the destiny of all Caribbean peoples together in developing a sustainable civilization that could bring prosperity to all formerly oppressed populations of the Caribbean, against reactionary forces that try to continue the abusive exploitation of these lands and people as if they were just providers for their hubris and excesses. The Cuban Revolution believes in sharing what we have through cooperation in education, healthcare, and sustainable development of our economies. Ever since Barbados' independence, our two nations continued to build strong historical relationships of our Bajan and Cuban societies. Initially, under the leadership of Errol Barrow and Fidel Castro, and today with the leaders that continue their path. Long live the peoples and the labor movements of Barbados and Cuba. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pastrano. A political meeting was held on an open spot at Golden Square on the night of 20th of July, 1937. About 450 persons were present. Clement Payne and F.G. Chase were the organizers. Clement Payne spoke first and said, "People of Bridgetown, friends, enemies, we are here again with the object of organizing you. But before I start to talk about organizing, I will tell you about my trouble with the constabulary. I received a summons on the 19th. It was handed to me by the detective sergeant, who had 5 other detectives, and they surrounded me. I am charged with landing improperly and for giving false statement relative to my place of birth. I have retained Mr. G.H. Adams. I have come to the slums to organize you because Mr. Ramsay MacDonald organized the people of the slums of England. I could have gone among the aristocrats, but they are deceitful. You have the ability and is able to judge things for yourselves. The police department has started a war against me. The detectives follow me daily, and even as I go out to take our lady friend, the detectives are there. I want all of you who are not working to come out on Thursday morning and hear my case. No person can stop you. Neither can 2 summonses issued stop me, for I am a sworn enemy of oppression." Ladies and gentlemen, performance by the Mighty Gabby and friends, What We Gonna Do About Clement Payne.
What you gonna do about Clement Payne? What you gonna do about Clement Payne? He fought for his country again What you gonna do about Clementine? What you gonna do about Clementine? What you gonna do about Clementine? He fought for this country again and again. What you gonna do about Clementine? He is a Barbados national hero. But our history books don't say so.
Oh no!
He fought for the rights of the poor and oppressed. He shocked and he rocked the ruling class.
Yes! Oh yes! Oh yes! Oh yes!
And he tell the people,
Agitate! Agitate!
but don't violate.
Agitate! Agitate!
But don't violate.
Agitate! Agitate!
But don't violate.
Agitate! Agitate!
But don't violate. What you gonna do about Clementine? What you gonna do about Clementine? He fought for this country again and again. What you gonna do about Clementine? Bay Street School was his old alma mater. Before then people call him a traitor.
Oh no!
He used to keep meeting over in Robin Square, but the police ran him away over to Golden Square.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
But he tell the people,
Agitate! Agitate!
but don't violate.
Agitate! Agitate!
But don't violate.
Agitate! Agitate!
But don't violate.
Agitate! Agitate!
But don't violate. What you gonna do about Clementine? Will you build some statue in his name? Cause he fought for his country again and again. What you gonna do about Clementine? What you gonna do about Clementine? Will you build some statue in his name? Because he fight for his country again and again. What you gonna do about Clementine? Oh, 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 what you gonna do about Clementine? I asking you, what you gonna do about Clementine? What you gonna do about Clementine? You fight for this country again and again. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? What you gonna do?
What you gonna do?
What you gonna do?
What you gonna do?
I asking you,
What you gonna do?
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 What you gonna do about Clementine?
Thank you.
What you gonna do about Clement Payne, performance by the Mighty Gabby and friends. It is now my pleasure to invite the Honorable Mia Moore Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, to offer the feature address.
Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished Barbadians all, and distinguished representatives of the Diplomatic Corps. We're in Lower Green. And we're here today because we intend to go home as soon as the work is finished at Golden Square, to represent this generation's recognition that a time has come for the issue of the 1937 rebellion to be central, not just to the history of this country, but to the inspiration that is needed for the journey by this country. And why do I say so? It hasn't escaped us, Ambassador Pastrana, that July 26, on the face of the records of history, saw two unsuccessful rebellions play out. They may have been unsuccessful to the protagonists at the time who lost their lives and who were incarcerated, but they were successful for spawning the movement that was to revolutionize how people in this Caribbean would come to live. And I start there because too often in today's world, where everything is expected as a matter of instant gratification, we fail to appreciate the importance of the journey and the importance of the trajectory. And I have come here this afternoon to speak only as a part of that journey. For I know only too well that centuries of oppression and deprivation and undermining of language and symbols and races and human beings cannot be overturned even in 8 decades. I listened to my sister, the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union. I listened to my brother, Trevor Prescott, as president of the Israel Lovell Foundation. I listened to Ambassador Commemoration and Ambassador Pastrana. I listened to Alistair, where are you, my brother? In what perhaps is one of the most powerful forms of spoken word that I have heard in this country on a stage. I listened to the spirits being called upon and prayed upon by Baba John. I listened to the wonderful examples of choral singing and music that we heard. But in all that I heard and felt this afternoon, I could only ask the question again that Gabby posed: what we're going to do. Not asking it in a vacuum, but I'm asking it as we make our way along this journey, and as we have come to this spot in the Lower Green today as one of the locations that was held as hallowed ground, yes, for Clement Payne, but truthfully for every political movement since Clement Payne. I ask these questions because we are equal only to the time in which we live. And if we fail to recognize that even as we celebrate and honor history, then we fail to continue the journey that is necessary to reach the destination. Our country has gone through much in the 84 years since July 26th and 27th of 1937. It is regrettable that this is but one of the few occasions in the 84 years that those responsible for the affairs of this nation could find it possible to celebrate and to honor an event that led only then to the incarceration and indeed assassination of many of our citizens. It is regrettable still to me as Prime Minister of Barbados today that the journey of popularizing and educating the people of this nation as to what happened, why it happened, where it happened, how it happened, remains only in the province of knowledge for a few and not for the majority of the nation. They may know the folk songs of Gabby, but do they know the story truly of Israel Lovell and Menzies Chase and Clement Payne? They may know that the British oppressed and prosecuted and imprisoned many, and that it took a modern government in the post-independence era almost 60 years and counting after to take those convictions and to wipe them from the annals of history, removing from our nation the blemish that they should be seen as criminals for simply asking for a better life for our people. But if we stop there, then the journey has a destination and ceases to be a journey. And whether it was on the other side of this long street, last year when we came together to move Nelson from our pride of place in National Hero Square, or whether it is from here, or whether it was in Britain's Hill a couple years ago, I have not tired of speaking of the cycle of enfranchisement and the circle of enfranchisement that this country has been embarked upon for these past 8 or so decades. It is a journey, and what are we going to do about it? My government declared to the world last year, on the 15th of September, in what anachronistically, hopefully, will be the last throne speech ever presented to a parliament of this nation, that we were ready to close the circle of independence, even as we fight on the journey to close the circle of enfranchisement. And we said so because the notion that you can have as your head of state someone that you do not have any opportunity to participate in the selection or election thereof is as anachronistic and offensive to the modern world in which we live as the notion that women should not have the right to vote, which was exactly what it was in 1937. For we only got that right in 1944. And Trevor, the other year that you left was 1951, when Barbadians of all backgrounds, without reference to property or salary, could go and cast a vote in order to be able to determine their future as citizens of this nation. And that's why I talk about the journey. Because 1951 could not happen without 1937. The formation of the Barbados Workers' Union in 1941 could not happen without 1937. 1966 could not happen without 1951. And all that we stand and do today in the name of educating our people on the basis that we do not believe that knowledge belongs to those who only have money, or keeping our people healthy because we don't believe that wellness and healthcare belong only to those who can afford to go and pay, or keeping our nation clean so that we don't have the public health issues that would cause those who are most vulnerable on the front line to suffer. These are the things that we continue to do. But like with everything else, we live in a funny world. And if Clement Payne was alive today, he would simply be telling us it's not only a funny night, it is a funny world. A world that has failed to live as if it had learnt from the journeys of the past. A world that has forgotten what it is like to champion the needs of the most vulnerable and the least powerful. A world that has forgotten that the moral imperative of leadership does not admit of us being blind to sufferation or being deaf to the clarion calls of people who simply want to sleep better when the night comes and to have an easier burden to lift when the day comes. When I did the first address as leader of this nation to the United Nations General Assembly in September of 2018, I had cause then, as I did in 2019 again, to reflect on how similar the affairs of the world were looking to the affairs of the world a century earlier, when the world could not unite to fight off fascism, oppression, bullying, marginalization and hunger and scarcity. And in spite of us watching it like a slow motion bad movie, like a train coming at you, the world continued on that track, continuing to marginalize countries for no other reason that I don't agree with you. And the only one who suffers then are the people who are least capable of protecting themselves. Continuing to espouse battles and to mark in the sand lines that would have people ask me as recent as today, that if I stand as a friend of one, you tell me I cannot be a friend of all. Well, we have learned and no different in this nation. We may not have much, and we cannot fight the battles of large nations, but we can humanize the world with the moral strategic leadership that reminds them that you do not need a flotilla or an army to stand for justice and to stand for moral rectitude in this world today. And why is this a hard moment for me personally? Because to have come to this point and to have to fight battles that we thought were long won by those who went before us globally, not just regionally and locally, is the most unkind cut of all. to live in a world where your ability to survive as a nation or to survive as an individual depends on how much shenanigans you can play to access vaccines and to fight the vaccine nationalism and vaccine apartheid, Jeffrey, that we have had to fight for the last 7 months is a wrong and unjust thing. And as we see the world learn that old Bajan saying, hard days you won't hear, own way you're going to feel. And what am I talking about? That the failure to be fair in the distribution of vaccines has seen exactly what we knew would happen with the rising and occurrence of new variants that threaten not just those who remain unvaccinated, but threaten the stability and the modern economy which they so wanted to defend. It is folly at its height, and we are now paying the price for that folly. Rather than come together as a people globally and set up an international clearinghouse for vaccines, genuinely on the basis of need, genuinely on the basis of wanting to work together as a global community, we allowed an absence of global leadership to affect us in every step of the way, from who should benefit from vaccines or not, and how we shut down and not shut down countries in a way that could never see the success globally because of the failure to act as one set of people in the institution whose birth we celebrated 75 years last year, namely the United Nations. Where are we going? And what are we going to do? And as if that were not enough, to add to that the consequences of the climate crisis and the failure of the world to sufficiently and appropriately adapt its behavior before it placed upon us as small island developing states and now those nations between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn on the front line, wondering why it is citizens cannot get water in certain parishes without understanding that groundwater has become one of the most valuable commodities in the world because we face a groundwater crisis across almost every continent and every region in the world. Or wondering why, when we go to the lovely East Coast and want to look out to Africa, that we have to put up with the smell, the toxic smell of the sargassum seaweed. Recognizing that these things have been thrust upon us, and each of them causes us to shift away from our intended plan for development, our intended expanded education program, our intended expanded healthcare program, our intended expanded program for housing. And with each one, we have to shift away and shift away because water, not bread, is the staff of life. Food security. But food security needs water too. And that is why our government has had to spend millions of dollars trying to create access to water across parts of this country. Because we now know from the passage of the pandemic, as they knew from the passage of World War II, that food matters and that we need to be able to prepare food without relying on ships bringing supplies to this nation. That is why this government set up the feed program for over 1,000 farmers. Does it take time? Of course it does. Does it take training? Of course it does. Does it take access to capital and access to water and an improvement of the soils? Yes, it does. And whether we like it or not, the passage of growth of anything that we want to eat equally takes time. there is a journey that we are on. We are not yet where we want to be, but we need to stay focused on this journey. And we need to be able to reach out to Barbadians, whether the youngsters on the side here, whether the people outside of this square standing up listening, or whether those who are listening through the technology that is now here. We have to be our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. It is not just an idle comment. And Bishop Adderley, it's not just to be rung from the pulpits of the nation. We have to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. And I therefore come this afternoon to promise a few things. One, that on the 30th of November of this year, our great nation which we love shall become a parliamentary republic. Secondly, that the Cabinet has accepted the recommendations of the Ford Commission with minor modification. That our parliamentary republic shall have a non-executive president that shall be elected by an electoral college of both houses of parliament, and that that president shall be entitled to serve initially for a period of 4 years and thereafter can be reappointed for another term. Thirdly, that we will make amendments to facilitate that transition to a new president to be sworn in on that day of the 30th of November of this year. And fourthly, that in so doing, that we start from the 1st of December the journey of the settlement of the new Constitution of Barbados, which will be the subject of extensive consultation and communication with the people of this nation. But to get to that point, over the course of the next 4 months, we will start and complete the discussion to settle among ourselves what is that trajectory? What is the spirit with which we want to embrace both the Republic and the new Constitution? Who are we? What do we stand for? And that conversation will be led by the Republic Transition Advisory Committee, along with other members of civil society and the government. Because there must be a charter of Barbados that is established and brought to our parliament before the 30th of November, such that we enter the morning of the 30th of November committed to the Charter of Barbados that reflects the essence of who we are and what we stand for. And for those who ask, but what was all this? A nation that cannot define who it is, or what we have done and what we stand for, and who we are as a people, will never be able to secure its way on the journey. It will never be able to do so. And therefore, across all boundaries and sectors and classes and ages and races in this society, we must, in the next few months, settle on those 2 or 3 pages that settle for us and the world what matters to us and what we are prepared to fight for as a people. And that is the bridge to the constitutional debate then, that allows us to move from a constitution that celebrates the role of government to a new constitution that speaks to the role of governance and that sets out with clarity the roles rights and responsibilities of each and every Bajan. The Charter, however, represents the pledge to each other. The pledge to you, your pledge to me, the pledge to him, the pledge to her. The collective pledge of what we stand for and what we will fight for. I have every confidence that once that is done, the Attorney General, as he embarks on the task of settling the consultations and the drafting of the new Constitution, that it will be done as a result of the spirit of the Charter. And for the avoidance of doubt, the Charter is non-justiciable, not because we don't like money, but because we are realistic as to what we can and cannot afford as a small, modern, independent nation. And not everything is measured in terms of money, but everything must be measured in terms of standards and who we are and what we must fight for. I look forward, therefore, to that process starting very shortly, and I look forward to the rambunctious engagement by Barbadians in that debate. And why do I say rambunctious? Because we live in a time equally where the isms and the schisms and the chasms all use to separate us and divide us. And as I look across this nation, I ask myself, why have we come to government at this most difficult and challenging time? What is it that we got to do? And in a very real way, we have now to show why 1937 should never have happened. We have to show why it is that those who have power must respond to the needs and the circumstances of the present and not just the past. Why we must be patient in building the future. Why the Constitution must not only speak about rights, but responsibilities. Why it is inappropriate for us to have a passive approach to nation building that is limited by the rights that we have, constrained only by the rights of others, and it stops there, boom. When in truth and in fact, it is not just about not affecting the rights of others, it is about what is it that you must do positively to build out this nation and to build the better life for each and every one of us in this nation. And Trevor, why is that important? It is easy to talk from here, but it is difficult to win the hearts and minds and souls of ordinary Barbadians and to get them to understand that the opiate of the world, entertainment, I love it, cannot be used to blind us from the realities of what nation building must be for a small island developing state that does not have the might of China or the United States of America or the European Union or those other large countries in the world like Indonesia, Brazil, India, South Africa. What is it like to walk in the shoes of a small man or woman, of a small nation? And I believe that we can be whoever we want to be. But in the words of the others who fought in 1938 with the establishment of the Barbados Progressive League, later to become the Barbados Labour Party, and in 1941 with the establishment of the Barbados Workers' Union, it could never happen without unity. It could never happen unless people found common causes and bridges. We may not always agree on everything, and I try to run a government that allows people the flexibility of dissent, because without that, we would betray the very first constitution which we want to change, which is that people should have the right to freedom of speech. We would betray the work and challenges and struggles of Grantley Adams and Errol Barrow and Frank Walcott and Hugh Springer and Charles Duncan O'Neill, all of whom fought for that day when the children of independence of this nation could mount the platform and mount the corridors of power and know the difference between right and wrong and what is fair and just for the people of this nation. They prepared us for such a moment as this. And the only people who can stop us is us ourselves. So my friends, I know that you have been here long, but I feel I have a duty to tell you that we have some difficult conversations. And they're not difficult because we want them to be difficult. They're difficult because the world in which we live has presented all kinds of things. And we have to settle among ourselves what is the road that we want. Is it going to be the road less traveled? Is it going to be the easy road? Is it going to be to go to the ends of the plank with blindfolds on and jump as if you didn't know better? Or are we going to begin to understand that in this journey that we have, I can't promise you the promised land, but I know that it is there. And I know that if we don't keep on this journey, those of us who must get there will never get there. I know that we have a responsibility to build on the past. And that is why I go in Murphy's pasture, Jeffrey, and make sure that the battles fought by my grandfather, for the vendors, for you, Alistair, in the 1950s, do not and should not be fought in the third decade of the 21st century. Or the battles fought by my father in dealing with the flooding when he was Member of Parliament for the city of Bridgetown, with the floods of 1970, should not be fought by you, Jeffrey, going forward again, especially in a world of the climate crisis. But I'm conscious and cognizant that the resources available to us must spread. And that is why the people, Trevor, in Bellevue and in The Bell and in Bailey's Alley and in Sixpence ultimately must ask themselves, or even in St. Joseph and St. John Dale, what must we do to guarantee the basics to our people again? And that is what this government has been put on a course to do. So that when people talk about the climate crisis, it's not an esoteric notion. It is going to cost us tens of millions of dollars this year, far less in every year, hundreds of millions, and over the 2 decades, probably billions of dollars to resolve the issues of access to water. When people ask me about housing, I ask the question, how has a country focused primarily only on middle-income housing for decades and not dealt with the density problems created in the early days of public housing in this country, such that people are living cheek by jowl in houses that can only hold reasonably 2 generations, but are now being asked to hold 3 and 4 generations? It's wrong. And that is why you hear me say that my government will embark on a silent revolution in housing, because low-income housing has been ignored for too long in modern Barbados. And while we have done exceptionally well with the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act and making people owners of land rather than being tenants in their own country, we have not been able to close the gap on public housing that is overcrowded, or not been able to close the gap on the new group of people who need access to public housing. It is also true that the lower middle income group was left out in terms of nurses and teachers and police, and we're dealing with that too. But we also have to have some serious discussions with ourselves, because the talk about vaccinations is not about mandatory or otherwise. We have already said that there will be vaccinations or testing. And we go tomorrow to the social partnership to start that discussion. But we also have to recognize, as the Attorney General reminds me, and I have reminded him too as a former lawyer in criminal practice in this country, that regrettably, people are also exposed if they know better and fail to do better. And that is what makes the conversation complex. If not, it would be a straightforward conversation. Because do you have the right to work in close proximity to someone who you know is acutely vulnerable and pass on to them recklessly a virus that is responsible for taking their life? These are complex issues. And more, if this government does nothing else, I hope that it creates the spirit of tolerance, the spirit of discussion, and the spirit of wanting to find consensus where possible, but being prepared to lead where not possible. These are, my friends, the times in which we live. And I have every confidence that those of us who may see some similarities, Tony, on food prices, at least food is accessible now. It wasn't accessible 84 years ago. The discussion on the social partnership tomorrow also starts on the issue of prices. Recognizing that we asked for a prices and incomes protocol, and recognizing as I speak to all of you and all Barbadians through this opportunity, that a little with content is great gain. We saw the landship here, and we saw when they went to rough seas. And we all know that when rough seas come, you can't move the same way, use the same movements as when the sea is calm. And if the worst pandemic in 102 years and the worst volcanic ashfall in 119 years and a worse and first hurricane in 66 years does not constitute rough seas, well, my brothers and sisters, I don't know what does. But in spite of those rough seas, we have to learn to save and to secure what we most value. And that is what we are trying to do now, recognizing that ultimately our salvation lies not only on what we do on 166 square miles, but how we can be global citizens with Bajan roots, because we simply do not produce enough on our own to survive and to maintain the quality of life that we would want on our own. It is for that reason that we also have determined that we cannot continue the excessive reliance on tourism alone. And it sounds easy because every prime minister before me probably has said so. But the difference is that I can't say so. I have to do something about it. And this government will do something about it. There are issues as well as to who has access to capital and who does not. And whether we like it or not, we are going to have to work with who has access to capital, but put arrangements in place for persons to access some of that prosperity and not allow those only who start with capital to concentrate the consolidation of capital in this nation. These are our realities in a Barbados that has been hit by those trifecta of events that do not allow us the luxury of plotting our way to the sustainable development goals or to the development aspirations of Grantley Adams, Errol Barrow, Tom Adams, Erskine Sandiford, Owen Arthur, Bree St. John, David Thompson, and Frandel Stewart, all before me, and Dr. Cummins. We have the responsibility to take up now. And it can't be passive citizenship. It has to be active. So the Charter of Barbados, the election of a Barbadian head of state that says to every Bajan in this country, whether you're born in Cat's Castle, whether you're born in New Orleans, whether you're born in Pike Corner, whether you're born in Rock Hall, that you have the ability to become the head of this nation as a non-executive president is the most important thing, because it isn't about the presidency. It isn't even about the one person who becomes the president. It is about the aspirations of the little children who believe that I can be anything from a president to a cricketer, from a musician to a doctor, from whatever. And that the circumstances of my birth, in spite of the trajectory of history that sought to downpress us, and in spite of the modern settlement of this nation that became the crucible of racism for the North Atlantic world, that in spite of all of that, we know how to overcome it, and we know how to rise up and to play our part, not with weapons, but with love and blessings, and with a humanistic approach to the improvement of people's lives in this world. A priest is not a soldier. And to each, there are different roles. And our role in this nation is to make the best life possible for our people, but to do so never forgetting that our experience, our tribulations, allow us to speak with authority on what is right, what is moral, and what is just. The thing that sparks the most for me as I leave this July 26th day was the betrayal by the governor of this nation, of Clement Payne and the people who supported him. How does one win an appeal and then be deported, having won the appeal? It was that act of betrayal. It was that tremendous incident of unfairness and injustice, combined with the deplorable and awful conditions expected to be foisted on ordinary people, that combined to create that special moment that allowed those of us thereafter to see better, to be better, and to do better. I end as I started. What we're going to do. If we're going to do it together, let me do it together. And if we don't want to do it together, then my brothers and sisters, I can't promise you that the future will be different. I don't expect us to achieve the final journey in my lifetime. I don't. Because the centuries of brainwashing, the changing of language and images has just been too powerful, such that many of us continue to be guilty of it, from Black Friday to all other kinds of nefarious uses of the word black and angelic uses of the word white. And for as long as those cultural offenses occur, we will not have completed the journey. My government chose specifically a new trajectory. We are conscious that we came from somewhere and we want to reclaim our Atlantic destiny, and that is why you see us making the decisions that we did. There are those who say, why send a man to Kenya as an ambassador, as a high commissioner? And I ask you, how does a black country not recognize that there are only 3 global headquarters for the United Nations? And we have representation in Geneva. We have representation in New York. But the one global headquarters on the continent from which the majority of our people come, we have no representation. Is that the mirror image that we have for ourselves? And if we are not prepared to make sacrifices to be able to ensure that we can keep on this journey, then anyone will take us off of it with so much as just a blowing of a wind at you, far less gale force winds. I ask us, therefore, tonight, please, this country, like many others across the world, is going through difficult times. All I want of the Barbadian people is to recognize that we need to go united and we need to go together. We need to make the journey. It doesn't mean that everything you want or I want we will get. But the broad journey must be motivated by that commitment to the principles and values that have defined us, that can keep us on the straight and narrow, but that can empower us to fight the bigger battles. All who feel that the battles are internal, I say to you, wait till you see the ones outside of our shores. And if we don't fight them as a collective together, then I regret that the moments of history will be repeated. Next year, let us move from Lower Green to Golden Square Freedom Park. And let us recognize that it is not by accident that this government chose to take an abandoned, derelict building from the scene to allow this nation to breathe and to breathe clearly. Let us not be ignorant of the fact that this government also determined that its first major capital works project in Barbados, in Bridgetown, would have been for the vendors, both from Cheapside to the Mighty Griner Highway, and for the ones working in Fairchild Street, opposite what will now be that iconic Freedom Square known as Golden Square. With your help, we will continue to make the journey such, David, that this is not a fringe event for those who come here because of their institutional relationships, but that this will become a labor of love and commemoration and a platform for inspiration as to what people can achieve even when faced with the greatest obstacles as we are so faced today. Thank you, and God bless this nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Moore-Motley. Prime Minister, be so kind to join us as we now recognize the laying of the floral arrangements right here by the artistic piece of Clement Payne. And as we recognize the laying of the floral arrangements, will be done in this order. The first will be done by the Honorable Mia Moore-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados. We invite the Honorable Geoffrey Bosse, Member of Parliament for the City of Bridgetown, to lay his floral arrangement. The next will be offered by Senator Tony Moore, General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union. The next arrangement will be laid by Ambassador Sergio Pastrano of the Republic of Cuba. And the final presentation will be done by Alistair Alexander, President of the Barbados Association of Retailers, Vendors, and Entrepreneurs. Thank you kindly. Please be seated. And as we bring a close to the day of national significance, the event stage right here, we invite Mighty Gabby and friends to offer what perhaps is an ideal closing note: victory.
roll to the rhythm now. Let the bass set the pace for the now. Hold on to the conscience. Let them know that you're seeking deliverance. Roll, roll to the rhythm now. Let the bass set the pace for the grammar unfold. Yo, personality. Let them know that you're seeking delivery from the debts of a major oppression. Your people suffer acute eviction. You beat you down, but you wouldn't surrender. Beat you down, but you wouldn't surrender. You descend for kings and queens. You went through the horror of scenes. But God make your backbone strong. You show them the right from wrong. You descend for kings and queens. You went through the horror of scenes. But God make your backbone strong. You show them the right from wrong. Rise up, you African children. Victory is certain. Victory is more than certain. Rise up, you African children. Victory is certain. Victory is more than certain. By day, by night, by the oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Oh le, 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 le. Oh le, 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 le. Hey, le, 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 le. Do bang, bang, man. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Roll, 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 roll. I say roll, roll to the rhythm now. Let the bass set the pace for the drama now. Hold on to your conscience. Let them know that you're seeking deliverance. Roll, roll to the rhythm now. Let the bass set the pace for the drama unfold. Your personality. Let them know that you're seeking delivery from the debts of a major oppression. Your people suffer acute division. They beat you down, but you wouldn't surrender. Beat you down, but you wouldn't surrender. You descend from kings and queens. You went through the horror scenes. But God make your backbone strong to show them the right from wrong. You went through the horror scenes. You went through the horror scenes. But God make your backbone strong to show them the right from wrong. Rise up, you African children. Victory is certain. Victory is more than certain. Rise up, you African children. Victory is certain. Victory is more than certain. Rise up, rise up. Give me chorus. Rise up, hey, rise up. Bring the chorus. Rise up, bring the chorus. Rise up, hey, hey, rise up. Dilly-dilly-lily. Rise up, fight, fight, ba-da-ba-da. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Hey, 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 hey. Roll, roll to the rhythm now. Let the bass set the pace for the drama now. Hold on to your conscience. Let them know that you're seeking deliverance. Roll, roll to the rhythm now. Let the bass set the pace for the drama. Hold on to your conscience. Let them know that you're seeking deliverance from the debts of a major oppression. Your people suffer acute division. They beat you down, you wouldn't surrender. Beat you down, you wouldn't surrender. You descend for kings and queens. Went through the horror scenes. God make your backbone strong to show them the right from wrong. You descend for kings and queens. Went through the horror scenes. But God make your backbone strong to show them the right from wrong. Rise up, you African children. Victory is certain. Victory is more than certain. Rise up, rise up, rise up. I say, rise up, rise up, rise up. African children. Rise up, rise up, rise up. I say, African children. Rise up, rise up, rise up. African children. Rise up, rise up, rise up. African children. Rise up, rise up, rise up. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the mighty Gabby and friends.
Let it go. Yeah, that's the rhythm and let it go. Rise up. Rise up. African children, rise up. Let me hear me chorus loud and clear. Rise up,
rise up,
rise up. African children,
rise up, rise up, rise up.
oh, African children,
Rise up, rise up, rise up.
oh, African children,
Rise up, rise up, rise up.
African children.
Rise up, rise
Ladies
up,
and gentlemen,
rise up.
PM, I thank you.
Rise up, rise up.
My brother Jeff, my brother John, my brother Ambassador, I love you all. One love. Rise up, rise up, African children.
Rise up, rise up,
Rise up, I said African children.
rise up, rise up, rise up. Rise up, rise up, rise up.
Rise up the African children. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us as we celebrate the Day of National Significance within the season of emancipation. Thank you so much. Travel safely.